Welcome to From Betrayal to Breakthrough. I'm Dr. Debi Silber, and today's guest is Dawn McIntyre. Dawn is a professional spiritual intuitive and expert in leading men and women into higher states of expansion and beauty consciousness. She's been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, USA Today, Newsweek, Wall Street Journal, and many other publications. Dawn was a regular guest on breakfast television and a guest on over 100 radio shows. Dawn is a best-selling author of Big Ideas for Your Business, Shift Happens, Bouncing Back, and the new 10, 40 Days to Creating a Boldly Beautiful Life from the Inside Out. Dawn also received the Lifetime Achievement Award for Excellence in the Field of Spiritual Growth by the International Association of Business Leaders. She's an incredible woman who has faced intense betrayal, not only in childhood, but also as an adult. Dawn's journey through physical, emotional, and mental abuse and her ability to rise above it all will leave you inspired. She shares how she healed from PTSD, recognizing toxic patterns in relationships, and ultimately embraced her gifts as a spiritual intuitive. If you've ever felt betrayed or are navigating your own healing journey, this episode is for you. Here we go. Okay, everybody, I'm with Dawn McIntyre today. We're talking about a pretty intense topic. I mean, we always do, but here's another one. It's not, as you always hear me say, it's not about what happens to us. It's about what we do with it. And you're going to hear another story of just that. This is really about breaking through betrayal consciousness and just a lifetime of what's been created and what we can do with it. So hello, Dawn, welcome.
Hi, Debbie. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm glad to be here.
Of course. So let's get started with your story, if you can, to give us a sense of why we're having this conversation today.
Well, I have actually experienced betrayal since I was a child, and I went through a lot of healing. In the about 2003, 2004, I did a lot of EMDR and healing, and then I found that I came into another form of betrayal within a relationship that actually took everything that I had been through since a child and had me, it was a type of annihilation consciousness. And annihilation really simply means they set out to destroy you. The person consciously sets out to destroy your life in one way or another. So everything that happened to me as a child, I re-experienced within the confines of this relationship that lasted a decade. It involved abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse. The hashtag Me Too situation came out. It involved my children. I had lost two children after my daughter. And so it involved my daughter. And I was literally at the end of the day, I was in such a state of PTSD. It's CPTSD, the complex form. And that's when you experience a form of PTSD on an ongoing basis. So I was in a pretty frozen state. And that's putting it mildly. And that ended about 4 years ago. And, but I was left to starve and to die and to be homeless. There was absolutely zero intention on their part for me to live.
And Dawn, just so, because I always want to make sure our audience really understands, those who are watching, those who are listening, and to the extent you're comfortable, like, share with us what you mean by betrayal as when you were a child, and betrayal, like what did that look like? Because it could be anything from physical, mental, emotional, financial. I mean, so many different types. So can you just so we understand and have a better sense?
Absolutely. Basically, as a child, I was physically abused by my stepmother. It typically the Cinderella story, but it's a lot worse because I was physically abused the second day after my father moved my sister and I in with my stepmother. it started on day 2. And I was very young. I was only 3 years old. The physical abuse never stopped from that day on. It was every single day. I never knew why. And as children, we take on that as somehow, you know, how do I be good? What do I do? What do I not do in order to not be beaten? And it was pretty severe abuse. I've gone through therapy.
Yeah, and did you tell your dad? Like, did your dad know? Like, and
My grandmother knew, and my grandmother tried to intervene, and my dad said no. My dad, unfortunately, didn't have the strength. He did not want to admit that things were that bad. It was for my sister and for myself. Um, so my grandmother ended up listening to my dad. And then alternatively, I did very well in school, but it was also beaten into me that I was fat, ugly, stupid, worthless. I would amount to nothing. Um, and that was what was beaten into me: the verbal abuse, the mental abuse, emotional, everything. I
and
wasn't, I
yeah,
wasn't allowed to, like, for example, my dad came in one morning to kiss me goodbye before he went. And my stepmother came in afterwards and beat me and told me that I was never, ever to allow my father to do that again. So I don't know how as a child you create this shield around you, but my dad knew never. So
yeah.
I wasn't allowed that type of affection and love and support.
And how old was your sister?
My sister is 10 months older than me, and it happened to my sister as well. We both dealt with it in very different ways. So I tend to be, I'm more empathic, sensitive. I'm very gifted, psychic intuitive.
Mhm.
And as an empath, that makes my gifts as a professional intuitive that much stronger. So it did affect me. It affected me probably more so than my sister. My sister was a little bit thicker skinned,
Mhm.
if that's probably an appropriate term to use. So it still affected her very
Yeah,
deeply, and she ended up leaving at 16,
right.
whereas I stayed.
Yeah, and what did that do for the two of you? Did you have a bond together, like, hey, we're in this together sort of thing, or
No, there was a distinct fine line between, there was no bonds allowed. I had a stepbrother and a stepsister as well. They were younger, not much, but younger. But we were all pit against each other. And um, oddly enough, whatever I got beaten for, my sister got beaten for as well. Whatever my sister got beaten for, I got beaten. It was just, so there was no room for any form of bonding as a child, not with my siblings. And my grades were really good. I was gifted in education. And my grandmother actually took my transcripts, and I got a scholarship to a very well-known private school on Vancouver Island.
Mhm.
And my stepmother wouldn't let me go. And that was a pivotal point, a fork in the road where my future life could have turned out much differently had I gone to this private school.
Right. And just,
Teenager.
yeah, and just going back as you were living through these times, what meaning did you make it? Like, what did you take from that? Did you it's natural, I guess, for a child to personalize it and say, what did I do wrong and how can I be better?
Children, what happens is children take it on as their fault. So they blame themselves. They feel the shame, the guilt.
Yeah.
In my instance, and with severe child abuse, it's really hard to understand what love is.
Yeah.
And ironically, my superpower is the power of love. And that's who I am at my core. I've had to relearn that and relearn that at deeper, deeper levels on a soul level and claim that for myself as a sovereign being. Right? And trust that that's my superpower and that's where my success lies
Yeah.
in
So
all areas of my life.
right. Okay. So here you are, you're growing up in in this really painful environment, and I'm sure it was so confusing, right?
Very
Because,
confusing.
right, you're looking at it like, I guess, to your father, like, hey, why are you, why are you going along with this? And then you shared with your grandma, and I guess she wasn't helping in the way that you needed, so you felt really alone. Did you have friends, and did you see a very different experience outside of your home?
No, I loved school. I loved school. And actually, I wasn't allowed, I never told my grandmother. I never told my dad. My stepmother said if we said anything about it, she would crucify us. And I
Mhm.
believed her,
Yeah.
right? And as a child, you feel helpless. And it's a learned helplessness.
Mhm.
That is the actual term. Um, but it's very, very common with child abuse.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was something that I had to unlearn as a
Mhm.
young adult. So,
And so, you just, when you said learned helplessness, you see those beautiful gigantic elephants, and there's like a little string on their leg, and they're not moving because they've grown so used to the
yes.
chain, and they just believe they're stuck. So now here you are, you're getting older, and at what point did you say, to yourself, to your sister, to anyone, well, this is, something's not right here, and I need to make a break?
When I graduated from high school, I was allowed to spend time with my birth mother,
Mhm,
and my birth mother lived in Calgary.
mhm.
So I went to Calgary for a week, and then I came back. It was summertime after I had graduated from high school. And within 2 weeks, I moved to Calgary to get to know my mom. I lived with my mom and started my adult life in Calgary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what happened to your sister? Did she do the same, or?
My sister actually ended up not finishing high school and stayed in British Columbia a lot longer than I did. My sister eventually did move to Calgary and then moved on to she resides now.
Yeah. So, one of the things I always teach is one of the classic signs of an unhealed betrayal is repeat betrayals. And it sounds
Absolutely.
like, then you had other relationships going forward where you were betrayed as well. Did you notice a pattern in any of that? And did you trace it back, or tell us the
It
journey?
was like it's like peeling back an onion, right? And it took a while for me to really get to the core. And I was getting there in 2003, 2004. I was getting there. And that's when I started really getting into my spiritual work. I became certified as a professional spiritual intuitive. I was doing really well there. It was not honored in my family, like even my dad. And then finally, after all of the um, outside influences basically saying that being a psychic intuitive was bad, right? And not being honored for that. My dad finally admitted, and so did my mom, that I'm gifted on both sides of my family. So it's something that was passed down for generations. And I embraced it still. I was on TV in Edmonton. I was on breakfast television doing live readings. I had my own radio show. Um, and then I met a man in Calgary. We got married, and I thought he was very supportive of what I did. And then it, for me, the unlearning, learning who I was experiencing who I wasn't. That's how I was able to get back.
Yeah.
But I did get help all along the way. I got there, right? And
Well,
I was very, very committed to my growth and my healing.
yeah, and I want to dive into that too, because everybody has their own sort of recipe of
Right.
what works for them as far as their healing goes. So was there, you mentioned therapy, and earlier on you mentioned EMDR. What were some of the things you tried, and what did you notice? Well, this really seemed to help, and this really didn't help that much. Like, what was your recipe?
Actually, it's EMDR
Mhm.
combined with my spiritual growth and really developing my light body, if you will. So understanding, connecting with my soul, understanding that I'm far bigger than my human awareness, right? That I'm connected to source, the universe, God, whatever you want to call that. And that connection is what was going to sustain me. It helped me to actually really work through a lot of trauma and pain. But there were aspects from my childhood um, that I carried forward that I did not start to even understand until I had just left Calgary, and that was the the narcissism. So narcissistic.
Yeah, and I want to get back into the spiritual piece in a little bit, but take us back. So now here it is. You said so you left. Now you're with your birth mom, and you're really creating a different life. You met someone in Calgary, and then you as much healing as you may have done, there's so much to redo, right? Like the ability to feel safe and the ability to trust.
Absolutely. And
And
you know what? I didn't feel safe. And what I'm learning now after my experience, after moving to Kelowna, and I moved to Kelowna with my daughter because my daughter wanted to go to high school here and live with her dad. And I honor her desire for that. And then also how important it is for a teenage daughter to be with her dad. So I did honor that. And I said, if you're moving, then I'm moving too.
mhm.
And that's where I met the partner that I had the 10-year relationship. That was very, very brutal. It was, he, he is what is called a dark triad, and I'm a light triad. So,
Explain what that means, please, for those who don't know.
okay, so a dark triad is narcissism combined with Machiavellianism and psychopathy. And but I did not, and I'm a light triad, so I'm empathic. I always see the best in others, and I'm always trying to shine my light. And what ended up happening, and I didn't realize this, and this is where I had to do a deep dive into narcissism and what it was, so I could start recognizing the signs right away. And but after meeting my last partner, it was slowly done, like daily. And then I was told by my therapist, because I'm still in therapy, I'm still doing EMDR. This is
Mhm.
over 4 years later. So it's an ongoing journey. Honestly, healing from this kind of trauma, it's not a destination, it's a journey. It
Yeah.
really is a journey,
And
right?
and share with everybody what, like, with this dark triad, what would be an example of someone who is like that? What would they say or do?
Well, for example, the narcissism, and that's not to be confused. I mean, a lot of people do have narcissistic traits. That doesn't necessarily mean they're a narcissist. There is a difference. My partner was a full-blown narcissist. So the lies, deceit, the gaslighting, um, utter lack of boundaries. I was healing from breast cancer biopsies. I had had one non-surgical biopsy that had to be redone 3 times. And then I was healing from that and getting ready for surgical biopsy.
Mhm.
And that's when I was sexually assaulted in my sleep. And I was, and yeah, so, but I had built up such, I put him on a pedestal, and the trust level was like right over the roof. And I thought I could trust this man with my life. And, I was love bombed. That's also part of narcissism. And, and so I didn't have any legitimate reason to feel that I couldn't trust him.
Mhm.
I was starting to feel off, but by that time, my light was starting to be dimmed. I was helping him, raising him up, and I took a back seat. So in essence, I was giving my power away to him and giving it all to him so that he could rise up and succeed.
And
And
it's
that
so right, so typical, right? It's like I talk about it in it was in Trust again, where it's like the tick and the dog, the tick
Yes,
just sucking the blood off the dog right there. So, and you had your daughter at this time during
my
this.
daughter was living with her dad, but one of my boundaries was that um, my partner not include my daughter in our relationship issues.
Mhm.
Because after the sexual assault, I did charge him, or I reported it, but I didn't charge him. We agreed that we would go to counseling.
Mhm.
But just before we went to counseling, he said, well, we'll go to counseling, but you can't tell the counselor what I did. So he would talk to me about it and admit it to me, but nobody else could know what he did to me. So
Mm.
it was not unlike my stepmother who abused me. But if I told anybody, she said she would crucify me, which I meant, or I
Yeah.
thought as a child she would kill me. And I believed her because the
Yeah.
abuse was that bad.
So
So
here it
what
is. Yeah, you're in a second relationship with some similar characteristics here.
characteristics, very
Yeah.
similar, very
Did you
similar.
did you start to see the pattern and did
I
something?
eventually did. It was about, after my second biopsy, I ended up having to go in for a third biopsy. It
Mhm.
was between the second and the third biopsy, I started to see how things were different with him, and that he was not only somebody I couldn't trust, but he was somebody that I became afraid of.
Mm.
I started to become very afraid of him, and that's when I started becoming frozen from the PTSD.
Yeah. So what'd you do?
I I was in a frozen state, and to be honest with you, I saw a psychiatrist locally, and they decided the best thing for me was to medicate me. But I was so overly medicated that I
Yeah.
just stayed and I tolerated it, but it got worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And then finally, in 2020, things came to a head, and I finally had to admit that the relationship itself was really destructive. It was going to destroy me if I
Mhm.
stayed in it. And I tried working with him so that we could exit the relationship in a
Mhm.
very fair, balanced way. I went to, for example, I went to legal aid, and he told me if I pursued legal aid and if I didn't do things his way, he was going to starve me. He controlled all the money,
Mm.
controlled everything. He took over all the cooking. He did the grocery shopping. I was not allowed to do anything, and I didn't really go anywhere unless he was with me. I lost all my friends, so I was very isolated.
Yeah.
So that's all part of it,
That's all
and
part of it. That's
it's all part
classic
of it.
gaslighting, sure, just to make you feel like it's all you. So then
Yeah.
what happened? Did you, and now here you are, you're in this really vulnerable place and frozen state and financially dependent. And was there a breaking point?
Well, we ended up agreeing that the relationship was over, but he wanted to live under the same roof until because I had a home business that was going to put me back on my feet, and I could start getting back into, getting healing and get back as an intuitive again. And that was my goal. That was my goal for myself.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, with COVID, things took a little bit longer and there were delays. And, but it was hard because we were under the same roof. I was still being treated very, very, um, I was abused. It
Yeah.
was very toxic, very abusive. And I started standing up for myself a little bit because I was getting therapy during this time. But, even like separate bedrooms were not allowed until I finally put my foot down,
Mhm.
and then that was taken care of. So I had to actually share a room and a bed with him, even though we weren't together. And of course, that was very scary for me,
Of
right?
course. So
So I lived in fear.
yeah, you lived in
But
fear. And then what, so then that was happening and now you're getting your business going. And then what did it lead to? Bring us to where you are now. Like what changed?
well, he ended up leaving, but he didn't give me any notice.
Hmm.
And so it was one day he just basically said, he said, okay, I've got boxes coming. I'm moving today. And this is what I've agreed to. And he agreed to 1 month
Hmm.
support. And then I was on my own. And that was it. And I said to him, I said, you can go. I said, I understand that this is not healthy for either of us. But I said, I do not agree to your terms. I have rights. I
Hmm.
have legal rights. And I said, if we can agree to what we were doing and a certain amount so I can live and survive and work on my business. And then once the business starts taking off, then I release you from all obligation.
Hmm.
And ironically, I was working with Health Canada and they did an assessment and they were concerned because we were living together at the time, still living together. They were concerned when he actually physically left that he would do something to assault me.
Hmm.
So, and he did. And what ended up happening is he agreed to what my terms were, but it was just done on a piece of paper. It wasn't a legal document. And he ended up sexually assaulting me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but I was, and my nervous system was under attack. And I told him, and he knew it. And I said, it's not always what you do, it's how you do it. I said, this is not honoring me or valuing me at
Yeah.
all. And he basically,
So,
oh, he
so,
said that to me.
so where are you now? Where are you now in all of this? What do you see so clearly that the
Well,
you're
I
living
ended up,
like you didn't?
I was granted disability for PTSD, like almost immediately. There was, I was literally about 3 weeks away from being homeless because I ended up being evicted from the, the apartment that we lived in. Um, but I was also betrayed there because all the furnishings, everything that made that house a home was belonged to me. And so I ended up losing everything, but I lost it to him, his family. My daughter took a part in it. My daughter colluded with him and how he left. So that was a form of betrayal as well.
Yeah.
And that was something that I had to heal from. And, it was very, very painful. Um, and, my daughter did help to move me. I got a room in a house with two other women. So she did help with the move, but we're not really in communication.
Yeah. So what do you see so clearly now? What do you see?
Well, what I see is I it was all part of my learning. So I can look at it as it's something that happened to me or something that happened for me. So if I look at it from the perspective that it's something that happened for me, then it allowed me to become very, very knowledgeable and clear on the difference between a healthy relationship, a dysfunctional relationship. Also, there's so much right now. I believe there's so much dark out there that people can talk about, but there's also a lot of light, right? So for me, it's focusing on the light, bringing light into my life, bringing light into others' lives. I had to forgive myself,
Mhm.
self-forgiveness,
Yeah.
before I could even attempt to forgive him
Mhm.
and forgive my daughter. And that was a process for me. And it's just understanding. And it's not forgiving myself in the essence that it's all my fault, because that's so not true. But taking responsibility for my part in it and
Yeah.
just knowing that, you know what, I forgive myself, I know better, and I'm going to move my life. And my life is going to be the best creation or co-creation that I can make as a sovereign being, a divine sovereign.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly been initiated, so you have all
I
the
have, yes,
all the tools
and
you need. Yeah. What do you want to make
yes,
sure everybody knows as we wrap up?
um, there is healing out there, and there is so many modalities. I don't prescribe to one or the other. I do know that my mentor um, with the Sophia Code movement, and I made that web or website available because there are free offerings monthly. There's the Sovereign Soul Alliance, which is healing from trauma. and PTSD in all of its various forms. And that's free. So, and then there's also the monthly Heaven on Earth prayer collective call. So that's all really good. And I found that all of that has helped me. And I'm actually considered, we are path of the initiate in that program. And it's through this program that I've learned that my healing journey is a journey. It's not a destination, but every day I get stronger and stronger and stronger. And I know I'm a resilient human being, but I've taken the time to get to know myself, embrace my gifts, embrace my power. You know, as sovereign beings, nobody can take our power away from us. Nobody, nothing. Like, it's ours. We're born with it. You know, it's a divine birthright, and it's our divine birthright to succeed and prosper and love and be loved and experience joy. You know, and that is basically my daily. Sometimes, you know, I have to negotiate with divine will versus free will, ego, human awareness versus my soul. Yeah. And it's a negotiation of, and it depends on the day. So I'll surrender to my soul a certain percentage. And some days it's 100%, and some days it's 10%, yeah. Right? But it's all part of the process.
Yeah. Thank you, Dawn. What a beautiful example of someone doing the work and moving through.
Yes.
What, you know, these are things as empaths, we look and we say, how in the world can people treat people like that? We don't think that way. We don't understand it. And that's why we don't consciously anyway, or intentionally create that kind of hurt. But when you can experience that and do something powerful with it, that's trauma well served. So I want to thank you so much.
Yeah. And I just want to say, you know, it was not mentioned. It was told to me over and over and over again by my therapist, because I kept trying to understand. And I was told there is never any chance for you to understand this as an empath. So let it go. Yeah. I was told to just let it go. You're an empath, you'll never understand. Yeah. And that's okay.
Right. It's a language, you know, we just don't speak. Thankfully.
Exactly.
And we don't even want to learn. So,
right.
So I get it. And I appreciate that so much. And so do all the other deeply feeling beings who watch and listen to this podcast. Thank you so much, Dawn.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Willingness to
Thank
share.
you.
Dawn's story is a powerful reminder that no matter how deep the wounds of betrayal run, healing is always possible. Stay in touch with Dawn by emailing her at adirectlinetothedivine@gmail.com. And we'll have all of her information in the show notes at thepbtinstitute.com/podcast. Here's my biggest takeaway. Healing isn't a destination, but a journey, and every step forward is a victory. Be sure to subscribe and share this episode with someone who'd benefit from hearing Dawn's story. And as always, stay tuned for more conversations that help you heal, grow, and thrive. Can't wait to be with you next time. And here's to your breakthrough.